Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we discuss my thoughts on episode 23 of the anime series ClassicaLoid. Damn. Mitsuru completely goes haywire, goes mental in a fashion that really harkens back to something I mentioned in the very early going of this anime series that it reminded me of, especially with Beethoven and the contemporization of his music and the other ClassicaLoid's music. It really struck me as being reminiscent to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, because of course one of the people from history that they bring forth to the future or the present day, as is the case in the movie, is Beethoven, who can be seen operating a keyboard in a mall sort of instrument store and everything like that. Very rock and roll-esque, and I love that. It was always my favorite sequence of that movie. And so a lot of aspects about ClassicaLoid, you know, there's sort of a science fiction-y element to it. There isn't necessarily time travel, but with the music and everything like that. And all of that enigma, all of that curiosity, and the overhanging question: what is Bach-sama after? What is the 8 sounds? What will they amount to? And you know, the machinery, the robots, the music, everything like that. Just really kind of always felt like a semi sort of, I guess you could say, a pseudo spin-off of those same kind of tropes. And it's coming full force in this episode, getting back to that whole mystery of what Bach-sama is after, and he wants to create the world anew, but I don't really feel like it's in a negative connotation. I really feel like he's trying to save the world. But for the perversion of Mitsuru and her Mitsuruloids 2.0, these robot versions of all of the ClassicaLoids who she's programmed in such a way that they can call forth their music, but she is in command of them all. You know, it's not like the ClassicaLoids who have their own personalities and they're their own people. They've learned to control their music and everything like that on their own. They've evolved on their own. They've grown and all these things. They've had so many experiences, but they're still individuals. They're still their own people. Mitsuru wants the same basic thing that, you know, Kanai's father created in the ClassicaLoids, but she wants to be in whole command over all of that, and you know, issuing orders and recreating the world in, rather than just a positive visage for all, one singular visage, and that of Bach-sama himself. She's manipulated these Mitsuruloids to all, you know, even though they all appear to be each of the ClassicaLoids, Beethoven, Mozart, Chopin, Schubert, Liszt, you know, Berezowska and Tchaikovsky and everything like that, they all are actually, their real purpose is for them to take on the persona of Bach and amplify his solo music sound. And at first it's utmost terrifying. It's like something out of the Twilight Zone, where all of a sudden no sound can be heard. With the exception of the ClassicaLoids, they are rendered unaffected. No one can speak. No sound emanates from anything. You know, a planter jar with a little cactus, Chopin knocks it over, you know, in the manor house, and when it crashes to the floor, there is no audible sound. People are rendered unable to speak, and you know, aside from like text on their mobile devices and things of that sort, they suddenly can't communicate. And there's this shocking moment when Schubert, who is the only one who's still out and about wandering around, you know, Bach had issued an order for all of the ClassicaLoids to be brought in. They all summoned forth their music and quelled the people who, you know, were trying to take them in. And they all got away, and they all went back to Kanai's house, with the exception of Schubert, who, as I say, he's wandering by himself, and he happens upon a whole crowd of people who are just stunted. They're like, what the hell is going on? Literally, they can't make a sound. And he asks out loud, you know, what's going on? And they all suddenly shock and turn to him and focus on him and come racing toward him. Is this your fault? Did you have something to do with this? You're the only one who can make any noise, any sound? And he's about to freak out. I'm like, whoa, yike. And this is only stage 1 of this octavus machine, this giant, like, multi-tiered, multi-instrumental device that Mitsuru has seen to the construction and completion of. Whether by extension of Bach-sama's own orders or not remains to be seen. I think it's something that, you know, she was inspired to create to try to answer to Bach Sama's wants. And in his initial plan, that was to utilize, of course, the ClassicaLoids. But she has perverted this. She has completely overrun this and become domineering to this whole idea, this whole concept, made it her own. And much as one of you guys, basically predicted in the comments on my previous episode discussion video, Mitsuru is the antagonist. She's the villain for all intents and purposes, not Bach Sama. All season long, especially in the early going, were we led to believe whatever this was going to amount to, Bach Sama was the sole tactician behind it. And perchance was his wants, was his desires antagonistic. Maybe he was the villain. No. That's not the case at all. It's Mitsuru. She ran away with what Bach Sama wanted to accomplish, and she made it her own. She perverted it, and now she's fully exploiting it, so that when the second tier of this octavus machine takes effect, which is playing the Bach Sama's prelude, sort of, at first it sounds very much the classical version, and it's kind of contemporized with a vocalist and everything like they've done with a lot of the classical music in this series thus far. With this second tier, suddenly everyone is being turned into Bach Sama. The wig just manifests out of thin air onto their heads, and suddenly they are much like him. Even down to speaking monosyllabically, all the musical notations and that whole language, that largely, as somebody who's not familiar with the composition of music and things of that sort, I don't know what they all mean. I don't know what they all translate to, but everyone is rendered into practically zombies, Bach Sama zombies. And as if my referencing Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure wasn't enough, this thoroughly reminded me of Doctor Who. Speaking of which, Dalek, when the Master, one of the Doctor, one of the Doctor's chief villains, some would argue, rather than the Daleks, he's actually the Doctor's arch nemesis, a fellow Time Lord. If you're not familiar with that series, the Doctor is an almost 1,000-year-old Time Lord, time traveler across all time and space. And one of his fellow people, another Time Lord, was kind of an evil version of the Doctor, and became consumed with playing around with Earth, messing with Earth, trying to destroy Earth and take over humanity, various times throughout the course of the series that is Doctor Who. And in one of the more modern seasons, one of the effects that he brought forth was to implant himself into a machine, which then transformed every single human being on Earth into versions of himself. Literally, they're showing scenes of, there's a lady, there's a kid, there's a guy, there's a dog, and all this kind of stuff, and then they're all the Master. Very similarly to what you have in this episode, everyone turns into Bach Sama zombies. Now, they don't physically turn into Bach, like was the case in the Doctor Who episode where everyone physically transformed into versions of the Master, but close enough. And I love it for that. I love the absurdity of that. And I'm just watching mouth agape as they're all trying, all the ClassicaLoids are trying to figure out what the hell's going on, what this is likely, how this has been brought about, and what it's likely the result of. And of course, Sosuke and Kanai, for a little while they're okay, but they end up being sucked in the end. They end up being transformed into little Bachs as well. And that was freaky because, of course, Liz goes over to Sosuke and starts smacking the hell out of him. It wakes him up out of it again. Similarly with Kanai, I think it was Batazuska, who comes over and starts smacking the hell out of her, wakes her up again, but they can't stop it. Automatically, they're both rendered Bach Samas again, and it really leaves off with a just shocking, freaky as all hell cliffhanger, because even though Beethoven calls forth his music and tries to wake everyone up out of this Bach Samarization, if you will, they all snap back into it. And then the last shot is showing the one cat who's missing, because they're saying, we still got 7 ClassicaLoids who can combat this. whatever this is, they don't even know at this point Mitsuru has any involvement. They think it's all Boxama. But Liz makes the point. We have 7 ClassicaLoids, each of us having 7 unique musiques that we can wield. We can do something. We can affect some change. Stop this in some way. Were it not for the fact that the 7th ClassicaLoid, Schubert, has just come home, and for all intents and purposes, he seems to have been transformed into a Boxama as well. Now, when I saw that, my breath caught in my throat. I was like, oh, damn. It's whatever this is now starting to have an effect on the ClassicaLoids as well. If they lose themselves to this, that's it. The world's over. Forget it. Nothing's going to stop. I mean, you have Kanai's father off in whatever hiding hole he's in. He loses power to his apartment, but he had like one button press away from shutting down the entire Octopus machine he had apparently put in a back door, which was going to allow him to shut it down. His power gets shut off, so he can't. I'm sure he's going to come running, probably using that remote-controlled, remote-piloted kite that he keeps going after Schubert with all series long. I speculate. I don't know. And then now, as I'm sitting here, I'm actually starting to wonder if this is Schubert's smarts coming to the fore. Maybe it's a misdirection. Maybe Schubert has not been overtaken by this Boxamarization. Maybe he put on a wig and he's just following the crowd back to the manor house, getting a sense that's where they're probably going, whether to, take apart the original ClassicaLoids, remove them as any potential threat to this Boxamarization that Mitsuru has put into effect. I don't know. I don't know why they would be all, clamoring sort of Night of the Living Dead style to the manor house in their Boxama visages, but it suddenly struck me as I'm sitting here now, maybe Schubert just is faking out the crowd so they don't try to attack him and come after him, and this is his only means of getting back to the manor house to rejoin the ClassicaLoids who are unaffected and band together with them and try to make a strike against Boxama, or whom they presume is the guilty party that is Boxama, but without knowing it's Mitsuru and the Mitsuruloids and everything like that. I love this series, damn it. I love this series. This had me on the edge of my seat. It still had the signature wit and humor that ClassicaLoid has in places, but I mean, it was intense. It got intense. When all the sound goes away, I was like, oh, wow. For a series about music, about sound, about a sound on a communicative level, it's a bridge beyond language, spoken word. It's something that can communicate thought and emotion and imagination to human beings the world over. And so what is the first stage of this perversion of whatever the 8 sounds amounts to that Boxama wants to bring forth? The removal of all sound. And then adding one step further, then twisting it all to one sound specifically that will mind bend the world. Boxama's own music, held against his will. We see him become chained, in irons. He's clasped in irons because Mitsuru wants to bring about an entire Boxamarization conversion of the world. It just blew my mind. Edge of my seat was I on the entire time. And then, like I say, toward the end, after all of this madness, to see Schubert potentially Boxama'd out freaked me out, because I'm like, oh man, if even the ClassicaLoids cannot somehow, be free of being affected in this such a way, how are they ever going to stop this? Unless, Kanai's father actually makes good for all of his absence all season long. Every time he's cropped up, as one of you and I were talking about in the comments a couple episodes back now, every time this guy shows up, it's like, it amounts to almost nothing. He's like speaking in riddles. He thinks he's got all these brains, and he never really puts forth exactly what his involvement is, what he's aware of, what his purposes have been, and why he created the ClassicaLoids, all these things. He's messing with people constantly. So maybe he'll be the one, he'll be the cavalry to come over the hill at the last second and save everybody. I don't know. It would be awesome to see him working in tandem with the ClassicaLoids he's created to that effect. And even saving Baksam and somehow quelling Mitsuru, although I don't know how that would all play out. But it really struck me in that moment, maybe Schubert was not in fact converted. Maybe it was just his way of making it back to the Manor House in time to try to rejoin the ClassicaLoids and try to put forth some kind of world-saving effect. Time will tell as we enter the next episode, and I'm dying. It's going to be a long week to wait to find out where this is going, and I will be waiting with bated breath, and I'll be there with bells on when we get to the next one. Love to hear from you guys in the comments below. If you've seen this particular episode of ClassicaLoid as well, what you thought of it, love it or hate it, anything goes in the comments below. Just love having that conversation. This is a mind-tripping episode, man, and just bring on the next one. Otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.